In 1990, I moved onto Markham Street, just down the street, and we had a two-bedroom apartment. Moved there with my partner and my baby daughter. And we had a two-bedroom apartment that was $900. We had a big backyard. So a few years later, we moved away. And in 1998, the whole rental market changed in Toronto. And that's because we lost rent control. So the way rent control worked was when we moved out, the landlord should have rented the apartment at the same amount. And they could only increase once a year at a particular, might be 2%, it might be 5%. But in 1998 that changed, and the Conservative government in Ontario got rid of rent control, which started the transformation of this area. In about 2000, I started to work in a community legal clinic in this area. And what had happened, because of this removal of rent control, the landlords throughout the area were trying to raise their rent. They wanted to take advantage of the end of rent control. So they were trying to push out the tenants who had been living there. And one of the ways that they did that was by saying that they wanted it for their use or for their child's use, and that way they could get the tenant out. They didn't actually move in quite often, and then they would up the rent to whatever they wanted. So that happened in my old apartment as well. That's what the landlord did. In 1980, the difference between what an average worker made and what a CEO made, a chief executive officer, there was a 25 times the difference. And currently, it's 250 times. So we have this concentration of wealth that is really impacting us as a society. People talk about bad tenants. The bad tenants would be the ones who don't pay their rent. But there's a reason why people can't pay their rent. Not that people want to lose their homes, especially if they have children, they have work that is in the area, their children are going to school. They don't want to lose their homes. Most people want to pay their rent, but they simply can't afford it. They have one experience where they lose their job, or they get sick, and we don't currently have sick pay that's legislated in Ontario. So they get sick, and suddenly they can't afford to pay their rent, and they lose their home.
This can no longer stand. I always find myself getting quite emotional when I come to this spot. I was once a homeless person. It's a shame that anybody is homeless in our society, and it's criminal that people have died.
There's something that people refer to as visible homelessness, and that would be the majority would be men, and they'd be men living in the shelters or on the streets. But there's also something called hidden homelessness, and that tends to impact families or single parents with children, women fleeing abuse, and youth. Because what they tend to do is move in with friends or with family, often in very overcrowded situations. So that our government to date, including our city government to a degree, they've really talked a lot about visible homelessness. But if you only talk about visible homelessness, you're talking about something that's very gendered in terms of the majority are men, and you're not actually addressing what's going on beneath that and leading to visible homelessness in the end. But women can't be on the streets. It's too dangerous. It's not that it's not dangerous for men, but it's doubly dangerous for women. And of course, among the youth, there are a lot of LGBTQ who are also in shelters or homeless. It's hard to take that responsibility. People become paralyzed. It's upsetting. And so we create fictions about, oh, that person must be on the street because of something bad they did, or substance abuse, or alcohol addiction, or now that might be true in some cases, but in many cases, when you actually talk to people, some of them mental health issues, some of them lost their job, some of them had a family tragedy that from which they felt they had a very hard time recovering and went into a slide. So, again, I mean, as a society, why aren't we asking ourselves, why aren't we looking after the most vulnerable people in our society, ensuring that everyone has what they need, whether it's eating or sleeping or whatever it might be, but thriving as well. And so the question that we're always asking in our organization is, why does the government think it's okay for people to have to buy into a private rental market for something that's such a basic human need and really should be a basic human right?